Howdy, folks. Welcome to Live from the Lazy T Ranch. I'm Ron Wilson, boat lariat. My wife's doing the filming, and we're glad you're back with us today. It's a absolutely beautiful day. We had an inch 32 of rain yesterday, so we're thankful for that. The Lazy T Ranch is located south and east of Manhattan, Kansas, on K-18 Zendale Road, along a route designated by the state of Kansas as the Native Stone Scenic Byway, because along that route in Riley and Wabaunsee counties, there are a lot of these buildings constructed by settlers more than a century ago from what they had on hand, which was the rocks found in these hills and fields. And so they built homes and barns and buildings of this native stone. And this barn is an example of that. So we're talking about barns today. The barn was extremely important. Now today we think of somebody moving to the country, they move out to the countryside and build a house, right? But we've read many accounts that for settlers, in many cases, the barn was the first building built before the house because it was the most important structure. The barn had housing for livestock and for feed, and as with our horses here, it was that was their transportation, it was their livelihood, it was their source of power, and so the barn was a very important structure. And I've heard old timers say at the end of a workday, let's go to the barn, meaning put away the horses, the workday is over, and we're thankful for that. In the case of this particular barn, according to this wonderful book, Pioneers of the Bluestem Prairie, Enoch Persons was the settler who came from New England, wanted to come west, took the train to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and then took a wagon pulled by a team of oxen from Fort Leavenworth right here to the Kansas River Valley to this very spot where he built this very barn. We'll say a word about this barn in a minute. There were 5 generations of the Persons family who lived here, and then some Manhattan businessmen bought it, and then my parents bought it in 1968, and then my wife and I moved back with our kids in 2006. In 1968, when we moved here, the ground had settled. Some of the walls were leaning and a little cracked. Dad said, you know, we could knock it down or we could fix it up. And my parents opted to fix it up. And then in 2006, when my wife and I moved here, the ground had settled, the walls were cracked, and we said, you know, we could knock it down or we could fix it up. And we chose to fix it up, really thanks to my mother. She made it possible for us, and she wanted to fix the barn, preserve the barn, and today we can say that this barn has earned national recognition, because if you look close here, you can see that this barn was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The plaque says Persons Barn and Granary, the grain storage building next door, circa 1860s. So we think this was built in 1860s, 150 plus years ago. It's been listed on the National Register of Historic Places by the United States Department of the Interior. I want to make 2 or 3 points about the barn. Number one, if you look at the rocks, the stone that they used to build this barn, think about that in the 1860s. They had no tractors, they had no front end loaders, they had no hydraulic power to move that equipment, or to move those massive rocks around. You know, those old boys worked a whole lot harder than I do, I think. Secondly, there's plenty of modern timber in this barn construction, but this is an example of a hand-hewn log that still stands, which means that Mr. Persons or somebody went out in the woods with an axe, chopped down a tree, trimmed it up, brought it in, put it here. You can see the axe marks, and this log still stands to support the barn more than 150 years later. It's really recent by those standards, and that is a milking stanchion that my dad put in when we came here in the 60s. I think we had one milk cow. He'd bring that milk cow around, she'd stick her head through here, put feed down here, clamp that over her neck. Then he'd go to the back end of the cow, sit on this milking stool with this milking pail, which was a whole lot cleaner in those days. Sit there and squeeze that cow's udder so that he would get a fresh pail of milk in that milking pail. The good news was that cow had to be milked every morning and night. She didn't take Christmas or Thanksgiving off. She had to be milked every single day, morning and evening. But it all happened right here in the barn. So I want to finish up our Facebook Live time today with a poem that I wrote called Barns Are Beautiful. I think a barn is a beautiful thing, surrounded by grass in the early spring. It has a big loft to store some hay with stanchions or milking cows from bygone day. Or perhaps a tack room or stalls, of course, where you can stable a cow or horse. It may have a gable or gambrel roof to maintain, topped off by a cupola or a weather vane. It may be built of stone or old wood, but it brings back memories when times were good. It's a symbol of our nation's rural legacy, a part of our landscape for all to see. And when you worked hard on the range and you're all in, just hoping for the work day will come to an end, it's great to hear the boss say, "Oh darn, it's quitting time. Let's go to the barn." So folks, thanks for joining us on Facebook Live from the Lazy T Ranch. I want to announce there's going to be a special edition of Facebook Live today at 4:30. It's an important